Welcome, everyone, to Loaded and Rolling. I'm your host, Thomas Wazen, trucking expert here at FreightWaves. And today's topic for this wonderful episode is going to be sustainability and clean energy. Going to be super excited to be joined with the folks at Nikola. And we're going to be welcoming on shortly Alexia Bednarz. She's the head of sustainability and government affairs at Nikola. And they have some not only recent sustainability efforts, but reporting, communication, workforce development, all of that in a bag of chips. So let's welcome on Alexia. Alexia, pleasure to get to talk to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I think she's muted. We may need to unmute you on that. I can read it off, though, because I do have it in there. Let's see if you can hear me now. It's unmuted. Oh, okay. Wait, we'll...
hear me now?
Well, yeah, now I hear you now. It's like one of those commercials. Good. But give us a brief bio when we dive in. Oh, I think you muted yourself again. I'm going to go through the thing. Over 10 years of experience in sustainability and mobility. Before you did, you were a manager of sustainability at U-Haul International. So really awesome background as well. Back in 2018, you did have the Outstanding Alumni Award from Arizona State University, as well as the Sustainability Champion Award of Distinction at Arizona Ford's Environmental Excellent Awards. That's a lot, but it's quite a bit of big thing because especially in the sustainability space, when we're looking at zero electric vehicles, folks don't think about trucking typically as a pioneer in it. And so as we're diving into this, I'm going to toss it over to you here. Tell us a little bit about how you got started at Nikola and some of the sustainability efforts that you all have been working on.
Sure. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on your show. So formerly, prior to working for U-Haul, for Nikola, I worked for U-Haul and I did study fleet electrifications for them as well as managing their energy portfolio. So I do have that background. When I came to Nikola, we were just getting started in production of the battery electric vehicle. So really in our infancy as far as studying metrics and where we might want to improve for sustainability as well as disclosures and reporting. But since then, we have been able to release an ESG highlights report that focused on 2022 metrics. And as we roll out production of the fuel cell vehicle just last year in September, we're focusing on our footprint in manufacturing of that vehicle as well. Some of our priorities have included installing 750 kilowatt hour nameplate solar array at our Coolidge manufacturing facility. That's going to support 18 electric vehicle charging stations, as well as a portion of the vehicle or the manufacturing facility's energy footprint. We've also focused on domestic localization of our supply chain where possible, so bringing that into North America and as close to Arizona as possible. We also have set very ambitious goals for waste diversion and recycling. So in 2023, we recycled and reused over 400 tons of materials, everything from copper, steel, cardboard, plastic totes, lithium-ion batteries, lead-acid batteries, etc.
I like the reuse and the recycle aspect. I remember back in my day hauling batteries, and people forget that you can find new uses, break them down, repurpose them. And so, looking at making this plan, especially with a sustainable ecosystem, were there any specific surprises or things as you all were developing it? Because I can only imagine traditional patterns of sourcing. Sometimes it can feel like taking the easy way versus putting in the work to actually finding partners closer to your operations to kind of reduce that excess waste and that extra, impacting the environment.
Yes, that's exactly right. Due to our geographical location, we're in Arizona, maybe an hour outside of Phoenix, the largest metropolis in the state. And so due to that, we are a little bit farther from suppliers and circular reuses such as battery recyclers than we like, but we are working our best to get integrated into those communities and to find supply chain that makes sense for Nikola. In some instances, these parts are the first of their kind, so there's maybe only a handful of suppliers that we have to go with, but we are looking towards the future. We've done everything from apply for Department of Energy recycling consortiums for fluted aluminum and platinum that's in the fuel cell components. It's top of mind to keep materials circular in North America, in the local economy as best as possible.
So this is a fascinating insight as well, because you're almost developing with this new technology as well as the fuel cells, the battery electric, and all these various power sources, you have the opportunity to help those other suppliers and help develop the whole ecosystem that supports it. Reminds me of automotive, where you have a plant like in Chattanooga, but then you have all these little tier 2, 3 other suppliers that feed into it. Is that something where you mentioned grants? Is there also help from any like state, local governments as well in addition to, or is this something you're seeing a lot of help from these local communities as you're setting up in this location and making it into this hub?
In manufacturing, there are some local opportunities. The university has been a really good partner and looking at some opportunities for circularity. But in the greater scheme of Nikola building out truck manufacturing and hydrogen fueling to support that ecosystem, we've received a lot of support from federal and state agencies. It's been a historical last few years for the hydrogen economy. The bipartisan infrastructure law was released, and there have been millions of dollars in fundings funneled out to the hydrogen economy, as well as supporting zero emission transportation initiatives. And so we're seeing the Department of Energy and the EPA and even the United States Treasury come out with incentives and mechanisms to fund these projects. The Department of Energy had some recent announcements. It was the Clean Hydrogen Hubs. There's 7 different hubs across the United States that focus on coalitions that will build out production and offtake uses for certain industries around the country. We also have the Department of Treasury released a proposal called 45V that's a clean hydrogen production tax credit, and that's meant to incentivize clean hydrogen fuel up to $3 per kilogram into the future. We're looking forward to that historic announcement coming sometime later this year. But yes, endless support federally. And then on the state level, from the state of California, we have been able to participate in several state funding agency programs, everything from TSEP, the Trade Corridor Enhancement Project, to Energize, to Carl Moyer mechanisms for funding. And we use those to develop out our permanent hydrogen fueling stations.
And when you're developing the stations, I know compared to like when you're looking at like a battery electric station versus a hydrogen station versus your typical, ultra low sulfur diesel, are there anything, especially in terms of challenges or additional things to take into consideration, maybe zoning, or as you're developing it out, or is this something where governments and states and municipalities are actually trying to make it easier? Because I can only imagine one of the biggest challenges is making sure that sustainable infrastructure is going hand in hand with an increase in manufacturing.
That is correct. We have, anytime you're pioneering something, there's going to be challenges that you run into because you're the first one doing it. So our modular fueling station that got off the ground in Ontario, California was the first of its kind. It's equipped with, bathrooms and amenities for the truck drivers. And we did have to walk hand in hand with the city of Ontario, who was great partners in envisioning what that would look like with their existing mechanisms for permitting and environmental clearances and such. So when we go into a new local agency, new locale, we are having to explain, here's a model from Ontario that we can follow, but it might look a little different in your region because it is region specific, some of these guidelines. We have had great support from the Governor's Office of California. Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development has been very supportive in working with these local agencies to go through the process about how we might be able to adapt some of the mechanisms to support fueling right now and an interim use. The modular fuelers are meant to be used for 1 to 3 years. Permanent stations take about 1 to 5 years to build out. And so this is how we can bring fueling to communities right now.
And I think that's cool because it talks about emissions. I think California is a unique place. A lot of people wonder, why does California care so much? Well, it's in a bowl. It's in a valley. You ever see the smog? Chattanooga had the same problem. We were one of the EPA's worst ranked cities because emissions would get in the area. Having the zero tailpipe, having hydrogen vehicles versus diesel, is this something where that is top of mind? I noticed a few studies back in the day. They normally talk about how truck stops and industrial locations can sometimes have that adverse effect because the fumes will wave over. Is that one of the big pushes? Does that also impact maybe where we're putting the locations to recharge, or since these things don't really emit harmful vapors, is that less of a challenge?
Yes, a lot of the grant funding that is coming out for fueling stations is in support of placing locations within communities that have disproportionately had to deal with the effects of air pollution. So, a lot of air quality management districts are willing to bring hydrogen fueling into their locales. Um, as you stated, hydrogen as a fuel source results in zero tailpipe emissions. The only byproduct coming out of the tailpipe is water droplets. And so we're avoiding harmful greenhouse gas emissions like carbon dioxide, harmful air emissions like particulate matter and NOx that can increase health risks in certain communities. So that has been top of mind, placing fueling stations within communities that really need this support and have been disproportionately affected. And if we look at the US EPA studies on greenhouse gas emissions, they say that transportation accounts for 28% of emissions as a whole. And we aim to reduce that. If we use UPA averages for annual miles traveled for a Class 8 truck and the average fuel economy of a Class 8 truck, our calculations show that one zero emission Class 8 truck in a community can avoid 106 metric tons of CO2 per year. And we know there's millions of trucks on the road, and so that impact is compounded year to year as more zero emission vehicles are adopted.
Looking into account other factors as well, not only emissions, but noise emissions, noise pollution. I know one of the challenges for truck stops and diesel locations is the sounds. I live next to a grocery store and I can hear the thing idling a mile away. For zero emission vehicles, battery electric, hydrogen, is the sound, the idling, is that another thing that maybe is an underreported factor, especially dealing with ordinances and zoning to where you can operate in these new locations? People are more likely to, hearing is believing, is what I'm trying to think of.
That's exactly right. Yes, there's a slew of other benefits that a community would experience if we bring zero emission vehicles um, within their community, as well as fueling infrastructure. So you would have reduced noise pollution. You don't have those idling noises of large vehicles in the community. You would have avoided air emissions and greenhouse gas emissions. You would also have the advantage of bringing some of this advanced technology within the community and increased hiring and job creation for the local community as well.
And looking at especially deployment nationwide, California's are definitely spearheading it in terms of incentives. Operating and building in Arizona. Is this something where any other specific locations geographically you all are looking at that maybe are more willing to adopt it? Is this something constrained maybe by our supply chain? When you're looking to set up more and grow and develop this infrastructure, what are some of the big things that you're looking for, especially from states that like sustainability and are willing to help it out and it helps the business model?
We have our eyes set on California because there is so much supportive policy there, whether it's from a emission standard reduction, the advanced clean fleets rule, which is currently paused, but we expect to resume soon. There's also a slew of incentives available, not just for the truck and vehicle at the point of sale for the customer, but for us to create hydrogen fueling. And as far as alternative markets outside of California, we see Canada as a large opportunity. Canada has a federal incentive for Class 8 truck, zero emission truck, and as well as a provincial stacking incentive. So it makes the barrier for affording the truck much less. And we see a lot of political support there to adopt modular fueling. And so we're very excited about Canada. The Pacific Northwest is also another region of opportunity. They're looking at a lot of what California is implementing as far as advanced clean fleets and their HVIP voucher program and looking to adopt similar mechanisms.
And when looking at, I kind of had a curious question about that because I know as we're developing and building it, especially in California itself, is statewide or is this another a Southern Cal, Northern Cal? Is the San Francisco pushing as hard as like an LA, or are there specific hot spots in terms of that? Because when I think of California, I almost think of it's dominated by these Inland Empire, LA. NorCal a little bit, Redding depending upon manufacturing. It does almost feel like distinct zones when you're almost even tackling that state itself.
Yes. At the moment, we're seeing a large focus on Southern California. And I think that is driven by the incentives coming from the air quality management districts. So again, those communities, they're disproportionately being impacted by air emissions. But that being said, Nikola is looking statewide to adopt zero emission vehicles. The voucher for the truck is statewide. The policy for emission reduction is statewide. The governor's breadth of control is statewide, and he's released several hydrogen roadmaps and funding mechanisms. So for Nikola, we're looking at the whole of California.
And looking at developing the sites and the infrastructure, I remember for diesel, you dig a big hole in the ground and you stick a tank in there, and hopefully the bladder holds. Hopefully it doesn't leak. I looked at some TDEC reports in Tennessee Department of Environmental and Conservation, doing the study back in the day, and the problem was leaky bladders. So when we're looking at hydrogen, I'm assuming the setup, the upkeep, and the location is going to be a lot easier than maybe the additional requirements of, say, that ultra low sulfur diesel, what we traditionally had on this infrastructure.
Yeah, there's certainly no leaky bladders. There's no underground digging except for like maybe utility use. There's a lot less to it when we're talking about, if we look at our model in Ontario, California, it's a pre-existing site that was underutilized. So we're coming in, we're actually rolling in on a trailer, a modular fueling platform. It's on wheels, but it's not meant to be moved very often. So we do consider that to be semi-permanent for the next few years while we build out permanent infrastructure. And beyond that, the energy team looks to hook up those units to electric supply where it's available. So it's working off of existing utilities. We also look for maybe a structure to support bathrooms or, a leisure amenity for the truck drivers. But if that doesn't exist, we can also do modular versions of that. But yes, so there's a lot going on as far as environmental impact. There's no leaking. There's no impacts to surrounding waterways or anything like that.
And looking at the hydrogen itself, is the technology there, I'm assuming, do you have to have hydrogen deliveries for the hydrogen, or will we eventually reach a point where we can have a modular production for hydrogen to refuel the tanks? I was always curious about that because I would personally try to double dip and have a hydrogen truck delivering hydrogen deliveries just so I could have double the efficiency.
Yeah, at this time, it is trailers handling the distribution of the fuel to our fueling sites. So they fuel up on a daily basis if needed. They're bringing the hydrogen straight to the fueling source. As far as direct to hydrogen piped in, there's been a lot of talk of using natural gas lines and such. I think that's such a long ways off. There's a lot we have to figure out before we get there.
And looking at opportunities as well, especially when we talk about zero emissions in the supply chain. I got to check out the Covenant, the Nikola truck at Covenant, and I saw one of your modular things over there. It was really fascinating to even get to do a ride along in the battery electric version. But when we're looking at partnerships, does this kind of open the door as well for, you see USDA organic, you see locally, humanely sourced. Will we eventually start to see this as well, opening the doors for maybe sustainability in packaging, saying to, zero electric or a zero emission supply chain? So if I go to a store, maybe I want to buy something that was delivered without putting anything harmful to the atmosphere.
I think that's a great question. I do think it could be used as a marketing mechanism that way to inform consumer choices. I know there is an existing program right now for zero emission vehicle fleet operators, manufacturers to participate in. It's called the EPA SmartWay program. And when we are talking to some of our larger customers, they are looking for participants in that program because it holds a high value to them. It helps reduce their Scope 1 emissions or potentially their Scope 3 emissions on focusing on decarbonization of their Class 8 fleet. But absolutely, that could be a mechanism that opens up a new spectrum of customers who that's important to.
That's what I was always thinking. Coming from my trucking background, any opportunity to make yourself more special to a customer and then they can pass on the win, getting your foot in the door, especially trying to win business, I always feel like. And we're talking about benefits because that kind of rolls into the benefits of adopting these vehicles, becoming an early adopter of this technology. Tell us a little bit about some of the feedback from clients, customers, as you all are transitioning, especially with battery electric and hydrogen. What are some of the early feedbacks as you all are, getting these first movers and getting that feedback from these early adopters?
Well, there's, right away they love the vehicle for the fact that it's zero emissions. But I guess additionally to that, they also love that there's some increased social and economical benefits. So we're getting some feedback from truck drivers that say, there's increased comfort in the cabin. Some of our fleets right now are working out of the ports, and where they would traditionally like idle or have to wait in line at the port, within our vehicle, because it's a European day cab style, they can stand up within the vehicle, stretch their arms. They don't have to get outside of the vehicle to do that. There's also advantages to not having to shift like a traditional diesel tractor. So you're avoiding like points for stress injuries, like on the elbows and in the shoulders. We also have a great turning radius, which reduces stress on the body. They can roll their windows down because they don't have diesel fumes. And so they're enjoying just having a little breeze. They're also enjoying the reduced noise pollution and vibration within the cab. Our vehicles are often compared to like luxury vehicles too, because they have creature comforts like heated and cooled seats. So there's a lot for the social aspects of the driver. Driver retention is really big. I heard a story about a driver showing up early to work because it was first come, first serve, and they wanted to drive the Nikola vehicle. So there's some other added benefits beyond just the environmental impact as well.
The shifting is fascinating because I think that's something that for the wear and tear, especially on the ICE engine, the internal combustion, I didn't think about that until when I was writing it. It just goes, right? You don't have to worry about any gear shifting. You could theoretically just continue to apply and it'll continue to accelerate. So that was one of the big things that for drivers, they don't have to deal with that constant, like going up hills and gear shift ratios and whatnot.
So true. Yeah, we don't have any shifting, and it uses a regenerative braking system. So it actually reduces the amount of times you're probably using the brake pedal as well, because it's doing that for you as it naturally brakes. It is recharging the batteries, and there are controls to accelerate or decelerate the regenerative braking to make it more stiff or less stiff. And that's an added bonus. Yes, it's a much easier vehicle to drive. You have to have a CDL to drive one by law. But, if you're on a closed course at Nikola, somebody with no CDL experience can get in the cab and drive the vehicle.
And final thoughts here as we're wrapping things up. Do you think, as you're continuing to develop this technology, looking ahead, what are some of the coolest things on your radar? What are some things that you're most excited about, especially as you're doing the sustainability push, but also helping educate and inform that, it's not just I'm missing out with sustainability, but also I want to be more operationally efficient and I happen to become sustainable as I'm becoming more efficient?
Yeah, I'm excited to see the real world impact of these vehicles being implemented into communities. We're just starting to see the iceberg of that now, but I think the numbers that the local EPA agencies will be putting out in regards to air pollution, it'll be tremendous. It's extremely disproportionate how much emissions Class 8 trucks have within the transportation sector. And then for Nikola personally, I'm excited for our journey. We're going to be releasing some information regarding our emission impact. So we'll be able to make some informed decisions on that, potentially reducing that emission impact, our energy, improving our energy performance and the like, and just continuing to increase awareness about these safety, social, governance, and environmental metrics that we're even beating our own KPIs on. So I'm excited to share that with the world.
We're very excited to be, continuing to watch the development. If folks want to find that information, learn more, get in contact, check it out, best way to find out.
It would be nikolamotor.com. Specifically for sustainability related information, we have an investors relation tab, and you will see ESG earmarked. You can find more resources there.
Perfect. Alexia, really appreciate your time. Really awesome stuff going on. Looking forward to catching up again soon.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Definitely check them out. The folks at Nikola, good stuff going on. The supply chain is changing, and in spite of the fact that a lot of times we focus on some of the negatives, like bridges falling down and other items, there's a lot of positive going on, and want to make sure people are aware of that. You can check this out if you're just joining us. Of course, this is a live show after all. You can check us out on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever this podcast may be put out. This goes out, of course, every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern is our live show. We have the newsletter as well. Loaded and Rolling goes out Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Tuesday and Thursday, 2 p.m. Great stuff. You don't want to miss it. So if you want to check that out as well, it's freightwaves.com/loaded and rolling. That's a wrap for this show. But don't worry, folks. We'll be back. A lot more great content coming up. Join us next week. We'll do it live.